good horse.
Hello and welcome to Advanced Manufacturing Live. I'm SME Media Associate Editor Cary Gitter.
And I'm SME Media Senior Editor Michael McConnell. We're pleased to be joined today by Ethan Baehrend, the founder and CEO of Creative 3D Technologies, an innovative startup based in Cedar Park, Texas. Ethan, who we're proud to say is one of SME's 2024 30 Under 30 honorees, started his first business at 12 years old, creating custom computer systems for his local community. He also worked as a 3D printer technician and launched several other businesses before starting C3D in 2017.
On his LinkedIn profile, Ethan describes his career as being at the edge of what's possible, building ventures that disrupt and designing machines that redefine what's physical. His stated goal is simple, but extremely ambitious, to enable the next generation of miracles by pioneering the next industrial revolution and providing the tools to make that happen. And it's not just big talk. Ethan's already enjoyed tremendous success, including speaking at the UN General Assembly, being recognized as a 3D printer manufacturer of the year, winning an innovation award at CES just this year. The company also recently secured $7.5 million in seed funding and moved into a new facility with a clean room and dedicated R&D space. So Ethan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. No, happy to be on here.
So let's get started a bit with your background. What made you start your businesses initially, and what kind of drove your entrepreneurial spirit from such a young age?
You know, I definitely have to give some credit back to my family when it comes to this. They were always very hands-on, always drilled in the mentality of be a maker, not a taker, is what they like to say. And very much to the beat of my own drummer. And it was very entrepreneurial. Since I think the story that they tell me, I can't remember that far back, was that since I was 6, they would have me work for everything except clothes, food, and board games. And as a 6-year-old, it's not going to be, hard labor somewhere, but it's like, hey, do this around the house. This equals X many pennies, and X many pennies equals a Lego set or something. And that drilled it in pretty early. So, when I was like doing Boy Scouts, I was hard at there with like the popcorn sales, and we did flag sales and all that too. And, I think all that helped push me in that direction. And so, when I realized, hey, first business was, local business for the computer systems, I realized I could do these and there's actual demand for them and I could make some money as a 12-year-old without any. There was some good interest there. So that all certainly helped push me in the right direction.
Ethan, I was a Boy Scout too. I never had much luck selling that popcorn. Did you have some success?
I did. I was deemed the popcorn king back in the day for the several years in Cub Scouts. And then in Boy Scouts, we did flag sales where I was also pretty up there as well too.
That's great. That's great. Well, transitioning from popcorn and flags, how did you get involved in 3D printing?
So I got in, luckily, at the, I think, same starting point as a lot of people in 3D printing did, which was that 2010 through 14 period where a lot of patents were dropping. I had some technical folks around me that I see as mentors and even advise me these days that were saying, hey, look, programming already at an early age, 3D modeling and things. This is probably a technology that as it becomes more consumer accessible, you'll want to jump into. And so I even have the old cupcake CNC, which from MakerBot back in the day, which is a interesting one to play with and definitely took a lot of patience for a younger person there. That said, I got really sunk my teeth in. I initially thought it was just a way to make, cheaper gifts that are personalized for friends and family. And that's kind of the goal. And just buy the plastic, design sign on, hey, here's something personal. And then quickly that devolved into me taking the things apart, reprogramming them, changing the firmware, and even going as far as printing parts to make the printers better. And I realized I like that a lot more than just making the knickknacks.
Very cool. And so tell us a bit more about your company, Creative 3D Technologies, and the Evo product, and how your single cell manufacturing process kind of differs from other types of additive manufacturing.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. No, and Creative I see as the linear progression from a lot of how the career went, because I had a business initially that was refurbishing 3D printers actually when no one was really doing it, which is great. And then that led into whole lot more and more until I started creative. And the goal at first was just to make essentially bigger, better 3D printers. That was the whole idea at the time, because what I saw the industry moving to, at least on the industrial end, was more hyper specialization. One machine works with a very specific set of materials on a specific size format, resolution formats, etc. And based on your budget, there's a very small handful of OEMs that make that exact specific type of machine. That's how a lot of general manufacturing markets work. It's one machine, one function, one software for one type of customer. So there's not as much direct competition. In my opinion, that's always kind of been the wrong way that we should be progressing technology, and I still stand by that. And a lot of creative's goal was to make more encompassing systems. And I didn't like that I couldn't do like architectural models, for example, because you would need a large printer to make something full size, and that's very different than the machine that's going to be detailed enough to do a full architectural resolution model, because that's your like SLA and tiny detail systems. And so whole goal is just make something a little more overarching. And I think Evo is a very good definition of that. It's large format, high speed, high temp, high precision, and we're actually able to beat out some SLA systems on how small we can go, and be able to combine all those in the same print, which would typically be very separate polar opposite machines, and even go into more advanced materials and even metals, make it pretty interesting, and give it a lot of appeal there. So that was always kind of the goal. But we're trying to these days broaden people's mindsets to not just limit additive to just printing. I mean, we're trying to push more towards like the concept of hybrid manufacturing, where instead of going from machine to machine in a line, what if you can do multiple of those processes and make something closer to a full product instead of just parts? So that's been the pursuit, and that's kind of the intent with Evo, to slowly ease people into a multi-suite modular platform that can go from your additive to, we have tools that we show on our website if someone wants to do like pick and place and embed hardware in as you go, to doing subtractive and other processes as well. So that's kind of the goal, is to get to that factory in a box point where raw inputs go in and a product comes out.
And something else I've seen in your background materials for our interview I was looking at, you talk about single cell manufacturing. For people
Yes.
that don't know what that is, can you explain it?
Yep. That's why I like the factory in a box analogy, is that is kind of the goal of it. On a production line, your systems and all your stages are called production cells. That can consist of something simple like someone turning a wrench in their own square and it passes to the next, or that could be full-on machinery doing automated steps. It depends. We go cell to cell to cell to make a product. Single cell is you have one production cell and that makes the whole product. So that's kind of the techie term. Just the easier way is just factory in a box. Material goes in, product comes out. So
great, thank you. And Ethan, in some of your materials, you talk about this idea of decentralized sustainable manufacturing. And what does that mean to you as a concept, and what does that mean for the industry?
Sure. Yeah, so I see, and actually this kind of goes into some of the topics I speak about at some of the UN events. I see that centralization of manufacturing is, I think, part of the problem, and I think the technology helps commit to it. It's not like there's a single person to blame here. When you have, again, one machine, one function, a very specific set of materials, and that kind of disruption in general machinery, that leads towards less innovation. So some of the topic points I hit, and there's some research behind it, but a lot of folks kind of show for general manufacturing, not much has changed in the past 3 to 5 decades. Innovation's been a little more staggered, and that leaves, everyone talks about the offshores, that leaves a lot of players that are more focused on production than maybe our country might have been, to keep buying and buying and buying and amassing quantities of these machineries. That makes the costs go lower and lower and hard to compete with. It's hard to buy as many machines as someone else did over several decades in less than one and be competitive. So, and I think that centralization, because of then the costs, everyone starts going there for everything production. Everyone goes to the offshore central stations, and then, instead of producing locally and then bringing it towards the final person, you end up having all the transportation, which is the second or third, depends what study you read, most pollutive industry out there, next to greenhouse gas production, or next to energy production, and all the greenhouse gases come with it. So it's looking at if we can shorten that transportation side, because it's mostly supply chain to get products to people. And if we can reduce the manufacturing side, where if you can have one machine do the job of multiple machines, that's now a fraction of the power. It's a fraction of the tooling, if not any, depending how you do it. That's less material costs, that's less power usage, less everything. And then if you bring that concept on site, if you decentralize and distribute, say you've got, essentially wherever, to give like a widespread comparison, like Amazon, if you have production within the distribution facilities for certain products, you've shortened out the timeline quite a bit. You encourage the use of local resources, materials, things like that. And either way, make it a little more sustainably. So that's kind of part of the shiny vision. I think that we need to shorten supply. I think there needs to be more innovation and pushes and support for innovation in actual machinery design and things that can be unique and move away from hyper specialization, which is hard to do, as it's, kind of the opposite of what you would do, thinking of it very capitalistically. And so those pushes, I think, need to be made, and that's kind of what should help facilitate that and ultimately drop and more easily drop a lot of emissions in those sectors, compared to like energy production is very saturated in people trying to make solutions. Those ones don't have as many people looking for them, so it's easier to make a large impact.
Yeah. And Ethan, was that what you spoke at the UN about? Some of these
That's
issues?
one of them. Okay. I've spoken on kind of youth entrepreneurship since, again, I've started out pretty young for sure. But I've also spoken on supply chain resiliency, industry, and then of course like that sustainability perspective of them too.
Well, you said you starting out pretty young. What were some of your initial applications and successes when you were starting out?
Sure. I think the business that at least had the most successes, I've been grateful that all the things I've done, I've actually brought to a good point of success, would have been, initially it was a refurbishing company where we would buy down broken 3D printers. It started with me buying a $200 machine online, fix it up for $50 worth of parts that I, mostly material that I used to make more pieces for it, upgraded, things like that, sold it for a couple $1,000s, and that actually led to, more and more and more until you're running a little operation there. So started on that, but that ended up shifting a little more towards R&D, where there are some OEMs that are like, hey, well, why aren't our machines failing direct from us? Why are our machines failing while this no-name refurbs machines aren't? And that kind of led to us actually getting involved with a lot of the OEMs without many people knowing the face or the age of the person at the face of the company at the time, which certainly worked in my favor. I've always looked a lot older than I am, so that's helped as well. But that's, I think, the one we really caught our stride in, got me really versed in, even some of the IP sides of things, licensing and that kind of technology. And that briefly overlapped with my time at C3DT until I ended that in 2018.
Well, you mentioned OEMs. Can you share any company names?
Not too much, unfortunately, but worked with some of the, there's a couple notable ones in there. There's a couple smaller ones in there. And we were able to make something impactful that I think there's a good few things that people wouldn't realize kind of came from us at the end of the day. It's just kind of fun to see the trend and be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are the kinds of parts that you've or some of the kinds of parts you've printed with the Evo, and at what volumes are you able to produce?
Sure. It's been a fun mix. Nice thing about something that is very capable of using so many different materials at different sizes, speeds, formats, means you're applicable to a lot of different industries. So we've sold machines anywhere to like notable film studios. It's just kind of fun to know a little behind the scenes of what might go on. We've sold to like hypercar manufacturers that are making some interesting stuff that's always cool to look at. And of course, they're doing like some of the carbon fiber and those more continuous parts. We've played around with metals. We've, especially in some DoD settings, rubberized or very flexible materials, rigids. We've had quite a bit of fun. So and at least personally, I can talk about some of the things we've made. I've had like a drift car that I had in the past, and we've made everything from like carbon fiber body panels all the way up to even metal components like control arms that really affected how it steered, how it worked, and still here later, so it shows I can trust my life behind the product, which is nice to have too. But we've had a lot of fun with it, and I have like a personal little brand that's done like a lot of costume design and things like that, which has been another fun little side hustle. But it's cool making stuff there, and it's just nice being able to have a method to make a lot of things that you can think of and have a tool that can do it reliably.
Yeah, and is the type of AM process you're using, is it SLA, or what's sort of the core method of AM that
It's
the Evo practices?
kind of a beefed up FDM where, despite being FDM, we're able to do resolutions and physical line widths that's comparable to SLA, and even handle metals in some comparable manners to even systems like binder jets, which make it pretty versatile. Because I think, in my opinion, otherwise FDM would be kind of the perfect tech, but you have the z-axis issue a little bit with the that being kind of your weakest axis, which we've been able to mitigate. But you also have some of the layer lines, some other things. If you can start to avoid the layer lines and them being as prominent, if you can start to avoid the limitations that would usually make you consider SLA for detail or binder jet for metals and things like that, using one system, that's like the most end use version, because it doesn't need the post processing steps for the most part. So
got it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Ethan, additive manufacturing in recent years is taken off. It's certainly gotten popular in a lot of industries, including some life-saving technologies. But as I'm sure you know, some of the largest companies have struggled to turn a profit. Why were you able to do something that so many others have had trouble with?
So I think some of it ends up coming down to a lot of the machine design. Something that I learned pretty early on, and this might be maybe a revelation to some of the folks listening, but no one really designed a lot of components for 3D printers. What I mean by that is, of course, we design hot ends and things like that to actually do 3D printing. When it came to like linear motion, you want to move something around and you just bought an off-the-shelf rail, and you would buy an off-the-shelf like ball screw or something like that from some of your more notable players and suppliers of them. And each of those suppliers have the whole spec sheet. Here's what I can do, no backlash, here's all the spec. And a lot of the OEMs then copy pasted that spec. Hey, we have this part in it, so we can copy paste and advertise this spec. When in reality, the way that a 3D printer distributes its weight, the way that it heats, the way that it vibrates is very different than other types of machinery. Those rails, those ball screws, those hardware pieces have been refined for CNCs, laser cutters, other types of robotics, not necessarily the printer. And you have to design parts for the function if you want to really get the full spec sheet worth, or else you're going to have some limitations. I mean, when we did our research, there's a ton of issues down to micron levels of stuttering that all came about not having built the function parts. And so we were able to mitigate a lot of that. And when we would do that, when we would pursue a new type of part, new design, we'd either work with a partner that can do so in the format that we'd like and train them on it so they can do it at an effective price point. Because sometimes you say, hey, make this custom thing. And then they're like, oh, it's going to take all these steps. And then you work them, hey, no, you can do it in this many steps. And here's the tooling, here's everything else to do it. You can streamline it. And so we did that with the folks that we outsourced to, and we otherwise make most of our stuff actually in-house. And we use our own machine to make more of our own machine. And we don't adhere to a lot of traditional design topologies. I mean, there are certain parts in this system, like we have one part that's patented, which makes it easy for me to talk about, like our fan shroud. Crazy design. This thing you could not manufacture in any other method than like a specialized additive, because it's got internal topologies and it's got arcs and it's got precision that a binder jet couldn't do, or an FDM machine couldn't do, or other machines couldn't do because of support structures and other limitations. And so it kind of left you like, well, if you can't make another other method, how do you make it? And we built the machinery stack and built the back end of our company to disrupt. I mean, if you're going to make a disruptive product, everything about the company should be disruptive on a couple levels. And so I think it's just a mix of everything. The in-house, the relationship supply, challenging certain standards, and always challenging the industry to go further beyond and make something better for the client.
And after that early profitability, you're kind of in a stage now, we understand, where you've taken a step back to sort of focus more on some R&D and development efforts, new initiatives. Can you share a bit about what you have planned for the coming years for C3D?
Yeah, well, within the year, and we're hoping to show it off. Don't quote me on it, but we'll see. We're hoping to show it off coming at IMTS, but we will have essentially a Mark II of our Evo system active. A lot of improvements that we think are going to help, which is going to help us as a startup go from hand assembling these to more mass production, because it's been a very manual assembly process. We will have kind of a newer, refined version that has a couple additional benefits. In addition to that, and we should have that, I think, active Q4 kind of in market. But in addition to that, the R&D side has been looking at a lot of interesting initiatives. In short, we found that some of the base technology that we built that enables us to combine these separate production methods has a lot of benefit in semiconductor fab, microelectronics, and those kind of industries, which are, as we know, pretty in need of good solutions right now if we're paying attention to the news. And we got a lot more and we bargained for in that pursuit. And there's a lot there. So we've been really pushing for that. And we should have some very interesting announcements come December.
Exciting.
Speaking of pushing, there's a big push right now for reshoring and domestic semiconductor production. Does 3D printing play a role in that? How does it play a role too?
Yes and no. I think there's a very different answer if we're talking about how we're approaching it, how we're trying to support that industry versus how the current market does. Right now, semiconductor fab is almost the opposite of 3D printing. I like the comparison of, think of where prototyping was prior to 3D printing. It was a lot of design, simulate, you hope it works well, because then you do your tool up and then you get your final product, and you might need to iterate and go through that all again. Fab is the same way. Design, simulate, you really hope it works, is then you go into tape out, make your mask, and if it doesn't work, you pay that all again, and that's expensive. That's millions of dollars, and even at the highest end, that's low billions just to get to that final product. There is no prototyping. There is no, if you're trying to mess with different substrates and test new architectures, no one wants to risk machinery. There's no specialty production. If you're a prime and you want to make your own chips for the DoD, you have to pay the same amounts or build your own foundry. So there's no in-house production. There's no legacy. There's no light output, mid output. It's pretty much mass production or nothing. So, in terms of what we're trying to do, we are trying to give the only alternative to mass production. So we're applying 3D printing techniques, but otherwise the current industry is more, molded, not like direct write, not like a 3D print where you just directly create the product. And so we think we can show some benefit by bringing that kind of thing to that industry. But otherwise, I do know some printers are used still in fab settings a little bit to at least make certain parts for some of the machinery or jigs, fixtures, and tooling. So there's some involvement in it, but it's not a major involvement.
Okay, very interesting. And kind of zooming out to the broader AM industry as a whole, the sector has obviously struggled for a long time with this bridging the gap from prototyping to scaling and actual practical applications, which last year at Rapid, that was really the message. We need to shift into what customers need and not just sort of the cool stuff mentality. So how do you view that challenge as a player in the industry, and how is your company kind of addressing and overcoming it?
Yeah, well, I think kind of starting from the how to address it, it's just embodying it, in my opinion. And when you're saying, hey, look, we can make a part that you can put in a car and trust your life behind it. Yeah, there's the proof in the pudding right there. Then if an automotive person asks, hey, can you make this part? Yeah, look here's the photos and I'm still here. So I think there's a lot to be said about the real application. I think it needs to be almost marketing stunty in that kind of mentality, because realistically, and that's how the industry started and that's how it fluctuates. It is, and all markets are all very much hype driven for the most part. And you have to build hype around it. If you can show that the technology is progressed enough to make real final products, there's a lot of people that back in that 2010 through 14 period when the news was telling them, hey, this is going to be your Star Trek replicator, material goes in, full product comes out, and never really got there. And maybe they bought an old MakerBot or something and got into the industry no, it's just a method to kind of make junky plastic parts. there's so many people these days, they're getting their hands on new technology. Are like, wow, has it evolved? The reliability, the ease of use, all of it. And so I think a lot of it just boils down to, for the whole industry, just hyping it up, showing the fun applications, bringing it out, doing some publicity stunts. We've got plans for like different, for example, like celebrity groups to, make certain parts for their sports or whatever they're doing, and then, show it off. Look how popular the Wilsons basketball was at the airless basketball. And that was a good example of kind of a unique, fun use case. And then the whole, industry jumped on it. So I think similar hype and driving hype, which, to be fair, marketing is usually not the specialty of a lot of machinery manufacturers, and I am included in that batch too. But I think that's the way to drive it, certainly. And, like I said, we just try to embody that as best we can by making real things, showing the results, and we're trying to revamp our website, showing industry use cases. Like, click on what industry you're in, and we can show, hey, here's a customer, here's a use case, here's what they're making, and help people connect the dots. Oh, if X company can do this, I can probably make Y. Making it easy to comprehend is, I think, half the battle. But I do think the technology on a general level is pretty close to there, if not already there, through certain machines.
Ethan, where do you see the additive manufacturing industry in, say, 5 years?
I think it really depends. I think that there's a lot of disruption that can be done in that timeline. And if we can have any say in it, it would be a different direction. But I really do think at least the industrial end, because that does make up, I think, the larger amount of kind of the higher end of additive and the cost behind it. And industry size, if you look at industry metrics, I do think the current trajectory is more towards hyper specialization. One machine very specifically built for a specific type of client and using specific formatted materials, software, etc. That hyper specialized niche where there's not much competition. Like, hey, you're trying to make X kind of medical device. Okay, you're going to buy Y kind of printer. And in my opinion, I would prefer to see it go a different direction, because I do think that goes against a lot of the spirit that additive really had in the initial days of trying to be, like I said, Star Trek replicator example. I'm trying to get to that point, have it be a more unifying, overarching tech that, engineers, consumers, and all these other folks can use and everyone in between. And I think making it so then you need a whole shop worth of these machines to make a basic variety of parts is going to be detrimental to that, but it might be capitalistically profitable, or it might be a slightly better model. So we're hoping to have some disruption and direct it more towards hybrid manufacturing, because I really do think that that's the end goal. I never really saw like additive as a consumer market, because, for example, like the reason we have paper printers is because we all have the literacy skill set to go to a computer, type up whatever we're thinking about, Word doc, PowerPoint, Excel, click, print, done. And, right now for a lot of 3D printing, for a lot of consumers, it's find a model, print it, and hope that you kind of get an end result. And the tech either needs to get to the point of making a full product and needs to commercialize of like a Amazon or someone like that to get in everyone's hands, or the literacy of 3D modeling needs to go up. And I think the first one is a little more likely of those two options. And that's certainly what we're trying to push towards: more single cell, more hybrid manufacturing cases to make products instead of parts.
Great.
Would anything in your forecast or your prediction change if you were to look, say, 10 or more years out, or not really?
I think the general thesis of hyper specialization as the market currently stands is probably what I would say even on a longer perspective, because I do think that'll take some time, even as kind of a newer industry comparatively to a lot of others. That said, there's always hope. The technology could always take a completely different direction, which is kind of the fun of, fast moving industries. We could find a brand new application, like even us. We found the semi side and that interest, and that's, been a lot of our focus and catapult these days. So, there might be other applications like that make it pretty relevant towards other industries or have new applications in there. But I don't think it would still then boil down to specialties even within those other industries and applications.
And Ethan, this is kind of just a fun question. You mentioned you have a side business of your own, and we know that you do some social media content on TikTok. 1 Week Rush, I believe, is your channel. So how did that come about, and what are the kinds of things that you make for fun as a side gig?
Yeah, I have always been nerdy to say the least, so I've liked going to the Comic Cons, that kind of thing, and
Mm-hmm.
they are a lot more fun if you go in costume and make something out there. And I thought, and I realized it was a quick way for us to, show off the product, and just showing how we made the things and advertising that and putting that online showed or drew a lot of attention, because then people asked, "Hey, how are you making that? What machine is that? I saw the printer in the video. That's kind of cool. What is that?" And I mean, social media is so widespread, and I scroll on TikToks every now and then, and so a lot of people, and even people in other C-suite positions, and they see something like that, and that can be the boiler and entry point in sometimes. So
Mm-hmm.
for advertising, it definitely garnered, and a couple million people have seen Evo as a result of it, which is fun. And for me, it's just kind of fun to make the costumes, like bring them to the Renaissance festivals, things like that, and just have a fun time, meet up with some friends. And it's fun to make that because interesting effects, and I can embed hardware, electronics, and things that a lot of costume providers couldn't. And it even landed us, bringing those kind of props to some of the shows, even landed us some deal flow with, like I mentioned, a larger film studio name, which is exciting.
Is there a favorite or notable kind of costume or particularly impressive thing that you've produced in that area?
There's a couple. There's a Japanese show out there called Chainsaw Man that was very popular, and then I did a whole effect where it's basically guys on like chainsaw for a head for a short summary, but made the whole effect of actually wearing this thing, having the chain turn around, smoke come out, and all this other stuff, and it was a pretty fun piece. Especially because for me, I could actually take the thing off pretty easily, as that was most of the costume right there, and the kind of flexibility, still be kind of casual, pop it on and off, still have it be impressive, get the oohs and ahs, win a couple competitions, was certainly fun. It's been a fun side hobby that's progressed to professional extents. Like we've done some work with game studios, movie studios, some other areas, which have been pretty fun. And, it's definitely taken off more than I expected it to, but most of my time is definitely focused or creative. So it's more just whenever I can get to it these days.
For sure.
Ethan, what advice would you give to those just starting out in manufacturing, especially if they consider themselves to be entrepreneurs?
Sure. Entrepreneurially, and this will come from a heartfelt place, and is in no means meant to discourage, but it is a tough road ahead. And I know a lot of people say that. The reality is true that hardware is hard. And I learned the hard way, and maybe this is some perspective that might help some other folks, but manufacturing is not necessarily a U.S. market so much. It used to be, I think, governmentally, and for all reasons people want it to be, but the action's not really there. When the final brand that is purchasing the product is usually going offshore just because the cost is so different, that makes it tough. Especially if you're a startup. Admittedly, it took us a while. It's hard to find the funding behind it too, because every day when you open Forbes or any of your large business kind of magazines or publications, you're usually reading AI, data centers, semiconductors, EVs, and stuff like that. Not as much manufacturing. But if you go offshore, if you leave the country, and then you start to tune into the same tier of publications, because that is a lot of their economy and market, they do read it. So what that trickles all the way down into is, in the US, if you're in some of the industries I mentioned, like data centers, AI, that kind of thing, the non-savvy investor, even if they're not in your industry, will already have an impression of how big that market is. And even if they don't know your company, they're going to want to jump in. And unfortunately, that results in a lot of investors, at least in the US, not really understanding the impact of manufacturing machinery as a market. That's huge, has a lot of global appeal, and even has a lot of initiatives for domestic appeal, but it definitely makes the path a little harder. That all said, my definite advice on the entrepreneurial side would be is bootstrap as hard as you can early on until you can build a real tangible product and show it. I know that's tough, but get to your MVP point, refine it later, bring on the rest of your team, but that is going to make things miles easier. And for all the additional stress that it is to build something up in that industry, there is, I think, in my opinion, a bit more of a reward. The turbulence of software and all these other companies and industries, it's definitely prevalent, and you never know what the next trend is going to be. And a lot of them tend to be VC cash grabs. But in reality, when times are tough, our industry does well. It does great. And when there's a shortage, when there's a supply chain crisis, there is demand for this technology because there is a need, because not enough people have invested or supported it. So, when times are tough, the industry does great. When times are good, it tends to do pretty good. So, there's a lot more stability in that, and it's something that's going to build a nice long-term business. And that all said, I do think folks are starting to come around more and more as government, everyone else pushes for this and starts to address it as a real need. So I think the future is promising on that. I think there's a lot of good opportunity for it. I think there's more and more opportunities coming in, but take it for a grain of salt. Be ready to kind of hunker down in for the long haul, and it'll take some commitment, but you'll build something beautiful at the end if you stick to it.
That's great advice.
Entrepreneurial advice.
And before we wrap up, Mike mentioned at the beginning you were a 30 under 30 honoree for SME in 2024. That's a wonderful program we have here where we recognize young up and coming talent and great minds in manufacturing who are on their way up in the industry. So we just wanted to ask you, as you were starting out and building your career, what did that recognition mean to you? Because we have nominations open right now for this year's crop, and how did that kind of bolster you, or how did that vote of confidence make an impact?
Yeah, I have been going for personal history, I've been going to SME events like Rapid for years. And it was some of my springboards in the industry early on, and reading the publication and other things always helped quite a bit too. And so, admittedly, I think sometimes we're all our worst critics, and the pursuit and the whole pathway can be tough. And it's very easy to, and I've fallen victim to it a lot of times, where you hit wherever your mental goal might have been, and the second you hit it, there's no celebration or anything. It's instantly like, okay, now I got to do this, and this. And I try to I print the articles, I keep the things up that there are recognitions of me on. That's why I have the awards and there's stuff behind me as well too. As there are physical ways to kind of see, look, there's enough of an impact here that other people and professionals in the industry actually recognize you for it. And I think just for me as a person, there's a lot of benefit, but I also do think, all the ounces of credibility you can give and that you can get, especially when you're a new, younger name in an industry and really pioneering forward to some interesting concepts and ideas that might be a little different than what the current trajectory is. I think those kind of votes of confidence help quite a bit. And so it helps for everyone involved, I think. So,
well, that's great to hear.
Well, Ethan, thank you so much for talking to us. And as Cary mentioned, we are taking nominations right now for our 30 under 30. It's a great way to recognize the next generation of manufacturing talent. Visit advancedmanufacturing.org/30 under 30 to learn more. And we also wanted to mention, this came up in our conversation a little bit, but SME will be at Rapid Plus TCT, America's largest additive manufacturing and industrial 3D event, April 14th through 16th in Boston. Go to rapid3devent.com for more information. I'm SME Senior Editor Michael McConnell.
SME Media Associate Editor Cary Gitter, and I want to thank you again, Ethan, for taking the time to have this great conversation and share your insights and expertise with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me involved.
And thank you to everyone for tuning in to Advanced Manufacturing Live.